Hi everyone, good afternoon and welcome to our Scale Up Stateside show, where today we are going to be chatting to a very special guest. But before I introduce him, for those who haven't joined us before, I am Amy Davies and I am the Managing Director of PGC Group. We specialise in supporting recruiters expand to the US and also in providing employer of record services for their contractors and clients. And today, joining me on this episode is Mark Sattin, Managing Director and Board Member of Finatal. Finatal was founded in 2020 and is the search partner for private capital investors and their portfolio companies. Now, I met Mark only last year as he attended the trade delegation with APSCO, and that's where I learned that Mark was employee number 3 of Finatal and has had huge success with them in growing the business. And today, he now leads their US business. And the groundwork for that, Mark started building out from the UK a while ago, and we're going to hear more about how he did that later. Now, I have caught up with Mark multiple times since we first met at the trade delegation. We may or may not have sang Mariah Carey on the karaoke together at the delegation, so we definitely bonded early on. But we more recently met in New York City, which is actually where now Mark calls home. And he is joining us very early in the morning there. So after that pretty long introduction, hello, Mark, and welcome to our Scale Up Stateside podcast.
Hello, Amy, and well, thank you for having me on, and what a great intro as well. Couldn't have said it better myself, so thank you very much.
We'll spare everyone a Mariah Carey karaoke today, and we'll just purely focus on the professional
after
side.
After 6 p.m. only, after 6 p.m. only, and a couple of tequilas or something.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay, well, thank you, Mark. Really appreciate you making the time for us. I think every time we've spoken since the trade delegation, which was May last year, I've heard about your progress in building out the US business, and I'm always excited whenever we talk, just hear about the successes that you've had. So I'm hugely excited for our audience to hear a little bit about that today. But we do only have 30 minutes, so we are going to whiz through our agenda before us. But anyone who's watching live, if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer, we'll try our best to squeeze a bit of time in at the end to answer those. But the way to do that is just through dropping them in the chat function, and we will try to answer as many as we can without distracting from the agenda set before us. If we don't get time to answer your questions, me or Mark will come back to you after the episode is finished. So let's jump right in. So Mark, you joined Finatal, as I said, as employee number 3, and you're now Managing Director and leading the US. So we're going to ignore probably the first few years of Finatal and jump straight into the US. And I'd love to know, was the US always the plan? And were you going to be the first one to put your hand up? Were you chosen? How did that happen?
So I think it was definitely in the plan from probably 2017, 2018 onwards. I'm sure people jumping onto this stream would have seen what we do. So we specialise within the private capital markets, mainly recruiting for the funds and their portfolio businesses. And by far and away, the biggest market was going to be the US. So, our mission was to become the leading search and interim executive provider to PE funds and their portcos. And, in order to do that, you had to conquer the US. So, I would say so. I think it's, in terms of myself, I think I was always interested by this sort of the new and flashy thing, as I'm sure most recruiters are. They get, do something for a couple of years and then they ask what's next and they want new challenges. And so I was always semi-open to the idea. I think the relocation was probably more of the life-changing event. And that took a bit of working through. So the difference between actually working in the market and then having to relocate and, start a new life, that was probably quite a chunky pill to swallow. I would say I was open to it and then approached by David, our founder, who basically said, look, we want to go live with this and I think it'd be an excellent opportunity for you. And, you've got skill set to do it and, go do something different and take us international. So, I would say probably a bit of a mix of I'm sure I dropped a few hints in there every so often. So,
Definitely. And it is a huge transition, isn't it? Kind of working the market, but then be it living in the market too. So how have you found transitioning across from the UK to the US, particularly from that working in the market? Have you found any key differences in how recruitment works over there compared to the UK?
Yeah, I would say a few things. I think, and we've touched on it before, there's almost sort of many different cultures compared, versus in terms of where the states are. And people just think of US as sort of one big block, and maybe naively so. And I think trying to understand different states or different parts of the country, different backgrounds are actually very different in terms of how they think about search, or how they, how quickly they transact, or maybe how transactional they are, or how relationship driven they are, or so I would say different sort of states will have different ways, or different parts of the country will have different ways in terms of which they operate, and you have to think about it like that. I think also just the size and the scale of the market is, until you've really been in it and experienced it, there is companies upon companies upon companies upon companies. And so I would say that's interesting, but even though the size and scale is so big, they're so well networked, and it's very intrinsic. Everyone's got a connection to someone else. They love networking over here. Yeah. It's all about business cards and networking. So even though the size and the scale is massive, I would say that actually they're probably more intrinsically interlinked, or people will know people almost more than the UK market, where we're a little bit more, prim and proper, and we just sort of stick to our own lane.
Keep to yourself.
Yeah, so I would say that's it. I think from sort of UK recruiters going over, again, I think because of how competitive the UK market is, and I don't want to say it's saturated, because it will depend in terms of what sector you're in, but there's a lot of recruiters in quite a sort of a short radius, a small radius. Whereas in the US, there's you've got the statistics on this, but there's far fewer recruiters in a much larger radius. So actually being in such a competitive environment in the UK probably has just naturally trained UK recruiters to be quicker. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just think, in terms of the training, in terms of the pace, in terms of the quality of delivery, in terms of the execution, I'd imagine most British recruiters, if you're doing well in the UK, I would probably knock it up what you're going to do in the US by 30 to 50%, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. I loved something you just said before that about, the market being quite intrinsic in the US. It's a very people relationship driven market, and that tangibility of relationships in that B2B environment is so important. And one of the things that I love about American culture is when you do meet an American in the market, they're immediately, as you get to the end of the conversation, their immediate kind of next conversation with you is, how can I help you? Or who can I refer you to? And that is so refreshing that they actually want to help you and introduce you to the right people, because you're absolutely right. They are so well networked. And I think one of the ways that also benefits recruitment businesses is from a candidate generation point of view. I know from experience of working with quite a few recruitment firms that candidate referrals is huge. And actually when a candidate makes a referral to another candidate, they've taken that referral really seriously, and so the quality of the candidate they're referring to actually meets what you're looking for. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think again, as a Brit coming over, you're a little bit weirded out by the whole thing.
Why are you helping me?
Yeah, sure.
What do you want from me?
Yeah, exactly. Where's the knife behind the back? So no, I think it is a little bit surprising. I think, we're not just candidates. I would say clients are actually so willing to help as well. Candidates, you've got that, again, you're trained. If you do a good job for your candidate, you do the right thing for them, you look after them, you're honest, all of that good stuff, they're going to look after you, and they're going to want to reciprocate, that love. But the clients, like I would say, if you do a good job with a client, they don't forget it. They go, it's harder to get in with them. But I think once you're in with them, and once you've got a proper relationship, there's been a few instances that I've had. We've done one piece of business with one client and I've asked him for 4 references already. He comes back same day, more than happy to help. Even before I've asked for the reference, he's already emailed that person before I was asking, saying I've already done it. So, I just, but it is very much relationship driven over here. It is, but it takes a while. I think from again, as a Brit coming over, they want to make sure that you're in it for the long haul, and they want to make sure that you're not just here to make money and to move on. And I think, again, if you're showing that you really put the time and the effort and you're serious about working with them, they go a lot further for you.
Definitely. One of the things that often will come out when I've spoken at events or done panel discussions is kind of the biggest learnings or failures that recruitment businesses have had. And I always talk about one of the kind of key trends that I always see is appointing the wrong leader to grow the US business. Now, you've transitioned from consultant into leader of the UK business, and now you're leading the US business. How did you transition, and what have been your key learnings from that?
I think the key thing is, we're in a recruitment business, so it's all about the people fundamentally, and you've got to recruit well. And I think, in terms of the right leader, I'd had a lot of experience. I've been managing and leading teams for over 10 years. And I had a pretty good, sense of the right types of people for what the operation was going to be. And also due to working in due to being so early into the business, we were a startup, everyone would finna who. I thought we were a telecommunications company every time we cold called. And I think, again, having that experience of going into a colder market and knowing what it takes and knowing the right type of personalities that are driven to do business development, that are resilient, is super important. So having that experience to fall back on was good. And I think, as a leader, was being able to try and identify people that you think would be able to operate in, it's not a pure startup environment. We get a lot of help from our UK business. We've got good credentials, but in terms of the US market that hadn't worked with us, we are. So I think the ability to understand who's going to be resilient, who's going to be happy to do lots of business development, who's going to be happy and emotionally resilient enough to take both a lot of highs and a lot of lows, and to be able to just see that as the job and to cut through all the noise. Yeah. Again, to be able to see that, what it's like working in a small office. You're with the same people for 50 hours a week and in a pretty small space. So you need people that get along. You need people that are positive and add to the culture, and a bit of a good mix of blends of personalities as well. So I think having to identify all of those types of traits is important. And then there is quite a big administrative burden when you're setting it up, and having, going through the legal setup and looking at offices and all of this kind of work. Again, you need someone who is able to have some experience to fall back on, or is able to make good decisions pretty quickly. And also just the pace, right? Because I'm senior enough within the business, you don't have to get, can we do this or should we do that? So therefore you can just move a lot quicker than what you would have had to if you keep having to go back to the head office to say, what do you think about buying some pencils and pens and all of this kind of stuff. So again, I think a bit of a multitude of things.
Definitely. That entrepreneurial agility is so important in the early days. The fact that you can make decisions, respond to feedback really quickly, and really shape that proposition and pricing. Because until you're on the front line, you can't really do that. It's not tangible enough. So totally agree with that point. So let's talk a little bit now about the US business. Okay. So some of the successes that you've found since going over there. So I think, first of all, what would be really great for our listeners to understand is, what work did you have to put into the business? Because I know you put a lot into it before you actually landed in the States and had the office presence and were able to really build the business. What did you have to do before to start the business off?
It feels like a different lifetime ago, but I I would say first and foremost is you need to put together a good quality business plan, and you need to be you need to actually have a valid reason to be able to go invest a chunk of money, and it is a big chunk of money to be able to go set up the business. So I think initially was, okay, well, what exactly are we going to do? What niche are we going to focus on? And how certain are we that that particular niche is going to be able to be rolled out quickly and start becoming profitable? And how long will it be till it's profitable? And then I think once you've identified the niche, it's sort of testing the market a little bit. So we did a bit of proprietary work of doing some calls or doing some meetings with people in the US, pitching different services that we thought would work well, understanding where the demand was. Then when we got a better picture of where the demand was, then we could start to understand, all right, well, we were going to focus on doing CFOs. So let's look at who the best quality team is in order to focus on doing that market. Then we looked internally. Then once we'd gathered 2-3 people internally, then we needed to understand about the visa issues of who can we take over. So then, our HR team helped a lot, but we'd hired some legal advisors to be able to put together the documentation, help us to get our visas. That was quite a long process. And then once we've got that, and once we'd started to sort of map through the financials and put together a proper forecast, put together a 5-year plan, then we related it back to, okay, well, what do we need to do now just to get us to profitability? What are the key hires? What are the key decisions we make now just to get us to profit? Then once we were at profit, then now we've effectively started looking at, how do we take this business to, different quality margins, and how do we then expand? But I would say the key thing is identify the niche, do some background work with clients in the US to understand where the demand is. Don't force what you're doing on them. That doesn't work. You can't take what you're doing and think it works exceptionally well here, and I'm just going to mirror it in the in the US. That doesn't work. You can't force
I love that.
your service onto somebody. They have to be willing to take, and we tried that. We there was probably a couple of things we had to adapt, but I would say do the work, listen to your clients, see where the demand is, see where it marries up with a good quality, but a supply that you can make some money off, and then start looking to build out the team, the right skill sets that you need internally from there.
Yeah, brilliant. So probably the question that everyone's probably going to want to hear the answer to is, how did you start winning deals in the US?
So we did a mixture of work. There would be some clients that we'd had in the UK that we would set up meetings with, and we would start calling them, meeting them, emailing them, all of this stuff to effectively say, hey, look, we're launching in the US. This is our service offering. We'd love to have a conversation about how we could add value, et cetera, et cetera. So there was the UK piece. The US piece was very much around, the work that we did going into it of understanding where the demand was. We would then basically map out who are the target clients that we want to work with, who are the ones right in our sweet spot.
Yeah.
And it wasn't too much, it's not too much rocket science to it. You have to find the candidates, and you have to have the candidates there available to you. You have to know that you've got the top 2-3% of the candidates in that market. Because if they do give you a job, and the jobs will be coming, I promise you the jobs do come pretty quickly, that you've got to be able to place with them. So the first thing is make sure that you've got all your really good candidates set up, that you've got your finger on the pulse of actually knowing. You might think the person's great, but how do you know that they are in the top 2-3% of the market? Because your name is associated. If no one's worked with you before, how good are the candidates that you're pitching? Because that's the key thing. We're a recruitment business, right? They want to know, have you got a solution, which is, can you find me the best quality candidate and as quick a time frame as possible? So the key things, find the candidates, and then start introducing your services and candidates to the clients, and start coming, sending that messages that you've got the best quality candidates, you've got them available at your fingertips. Because again, with the notice periods and how quickly the market moves, you need to be able to demonstrate that. So I would say very, very much candidate led. And then once they can demonstrate, once they've seen that you've got good quality candidates and that you're reputable, then it's about landing and expanding. Then it's about, okay, who else in the business can we work with? What other relationships does this person know outside of them through other firms that we can start using to network with as well? But the key thing is get your candidates together and make sure you've got the best people in the market before you go live.
Yeah. And you guys landed in New York in Q4 of last year. And I think when we met, it was January earlier this year in the city. But you told me how you guys have been building that candidate pipeline for about 9 months from the UK, so that you had essentially the product to take to market. So it started long before you were physically present in the US. And I think something that people do overlook is the time it does take to build up a brand and to build that pipeline up so that you can, because as you say, the jobs will come, but so that you can absolutely fill them and maximize it and start those client relationships from the outset in the right way. What would you say has surprised you most about the US market?
I would just say the size and the scale of the opportunity that's just left untapped. I think in the UK market and the European market, it is a good market. But the US there's so much there to take on, and there's so much opportunity. They don't blink at the size of the fees that you're putting through. It's everything's bigger. So I would say, probably a little bit to do with that. And I think, just the fast paced nature of it, things just move, super quickly as well. So I'd say a mixture of those.
Great. Just want to briefly touch back upon leadership, because we spoke about that very briefly, and you spoke about choosing the right team to take over with you. And I've met those guys. They're absolutely brilliant, and I know they're thriving in New York City. They're over there with you now, and I know since then you've then hired Americans to join and to build out that team. And working culture is very different across both locations, as you will now know, as I know very well too. How have you been able to, if you have, adopt the Finatal culture and create that over in the US, but also blend it to fit US culture? And what have been kind of the main differences you've noticed as you've done that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say that's probably one of the keys to the success is if you can get that right, that is super important. I think the culture is mainly down to the people. So you need the right, if you're bringing British people over, you need the right sort of first 3 or 4, which are really embodied the cultural values of the business. I started as a graduate, so I've been with one business. It was all I knew, and therefore I helped form part of that culture. And then the other 2 that came over were both graduates as well. And then we trained them up the first 3 years before we took them over. So again, they were dry sponges, and we embodied them with the right values and the right culture. Yeah. And, we were certain that just the 3 of us being here and then the further people to come would automatically be the nucleus of the right types of values that we wanted to have for the business. And then there's a degree of then adding local talent to that. Now, the local talent has to, we've got 5 cultural values that we stick to. We send those values to the people we're recruiting before we hire them, and we ask them why we think they fit in with our values. And they have to do a presentation around why they think that, they want to work in a business that embodies those values. So there's a degree of we're hiring for our values in terms of the local talent to make sure that, there's no misalignment. But then there's also a degree of just listening and just being understanding of, you don't know everything. And there's some ways in which the local talent is going to have to come to us more. And there's going to be some ways in which actually, we as Brits need to come to them more because they'd probably be doing things better than we have. And I think it's just about listening. We took on someone pretty senior right at the beginning who I think was super helpful because she's very dominant personality, and she was very happy to say, hey, you're doing this wrong, or you're doing this right, or doing this wrong, or you're doing this right. And actually helped us become culturally much more of a US business.
Yes.
Every time I was sending an email out, if it had S's instead of Z's, or
yes,
or just small stuff like this, she would be able to give feedback. So I think getting in a US local hire very quickly, someone who's a little bit sort of seasoned, who's seen situations and experiences, and leaning on them could be it's a big thing as well.
Yeah, love that piece of advice. Time is running away, so I'm going to jump now to New York. Obviously, you now live in that city, as do I know the team that you took over there. Why did you choose New York? And was it always the plan to be there, or did it come after research? What was behind the decision?
Can I say the weather?
You can if you want. It's not why I would choose New York.
No, fair play. We do have our third heat wave in the space of about 4 weeks. Otherwise, it was about 36, 37 degrees. So maybe not this time.
Wow.
I think there was a degree of, again, taking it back to the market research, the biggest, the funds with the most money to spend, and where the heart of private equity was. Is New York. So that was important, and I think there's also a bit of a symbolism where we discussed it as a joke over it. But if you can sort of conquer New York, if you can do it here, you can do it anywhere. And there's that bit of there's the piece around. I mean, we're operating all across the US, so we don't have to come to New York. But I think there's a degree of the local market, and there's a lot of clients here. There's a degree of symbolism of actually, if you're in New York and you're doing well, you are an established business, and only really good businesses can survive and thrive there. And that's again the right messages out to the market. And then there's the third of attracting local talent. I've heard some people here will have an office in Miami or San Diego, but I think actually when you come to being here permanently and the first moving over, it's got everything, right? It's fast paced, it's super exciting. It is a great place to live. I was a little bit hesitant coming over. I just thought it was all going to be a massive Times Square and tourists everywhere, but actually there's some amazing places, and it's just a lot of fun. I would say years feel like weeks here. Time just sort of seems to, and there's a certain energy about it. So that's, I think, important for attracting talent. And there's a lot of young people after graduating, or who are super ambitious that want to come and earn money. They move to New York as well. And I think also it's good that you're only a 6-hour plane ride away from London as well. So we go back and see our head office pretty frequently. That helps. But I think it's a multitude of those things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, PGC, we grew our business in New York for over a decade, and it was, a tough market, but you're absolutely right. It is a bit cliche if you say if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, but actually in business terms, it's legitimately true. And I think there's a respect in the B2B arena 100%. That if you are thriving in New York City, you're a quality business and you immediately garner that respect. So 100% agree with what you said on that. Just in terms of, you mentioned about your team are thriving in New York City. And I know when you initially spec'd out New York City whilst we were on the trade delegation last year, one of the big surprises was cost of living, including rent and all those lovely things. So given the cost of living and how competitive it's been, do you still feel on the other side of that it sounds like this is going to be an absolute yes, that you made the right decision in selecting New York City?
Yeah, I definitely say so. I'd say inflation all across the whole of the US has just gone through the roof. So New York's probably a little bit above what average is. But as I said, everything is bigger. So, the fees are bigger.
Yeah.
The income's bigger. The commission checks are bigger. The cost of living, therefore, is bigger. Everything is just, it sort of works in proportion. But I think it's important that the first 2 quarters specific, first two quarters, people need to feel, because it's a bit of a, first time we went shopping, we did our first food shop. A jar of mayonnaise was $14. I used to go food shopping with my wife, and we would come back with nothing because everything that she looked at, I'm not buying that. I was like, we've got to eat. Look at me, I've got to eat. So it is astronomically expensive, and even now you still become slightly less immune to it. But I think you do start to see that everything is bigger. But I would say the first two quarters, people need to feel that they are supported and looked after. And I would say that a big chunk of the cost to make sure that the people that you're taking feel like, actually, I've got a good quarter or 2 quarters to build my candidate pool, get my base up, start winning some business. So then the third, fourth quarter, I can start earning commission. I'd say the first quarter or 2. And it's also the reason why I would say, going back to before, you want to be able to land and be straight onto business development and probably already have a couple of wins and probably already have some success and some credentials. So that's why the candidate piece of the first 6 to 9 months should really be UK focused. And then when you land, you're actually confident going into the market and not thinking, how am I going to win any business? It's actually, I already know what I'm doing. I've got some jobs. Winning, like, all of this stuff makes you feel a lot better, and the people feeling better about they're going to earn some commission to be able to afford the cost of living.
Yeah, definitely. And that whole making sure your team is settled and thriving is so key to the success of that early growth in the business. Couldn't agree more. Just quickly before we touch on what's next for Finatal, what are your thoughts on the US market as a whole for this year? And, maybe in particular, New York, what you've been seeing?
I think the market is, I think what we've heard so far from last year was it was a little bit more of a frothy market, is what it's been described as. There was definitely opportunities there, but I think the timelines to get stuff done took a lot longer, and I think there was a lot more decision makers. There was a lot more reservations about pulling the triggers or candidates moving or all of this kind of stuff. So I think that tends to ease now. We've got the election this year, so I think that is still playing a little bit on people's minds. So I think we're sort of waiting for the election to happen. Inflation feels like it's definitely dropping. They feel like the worst of the market's behind us. There's been talks that, again, last year we were definitely hitting a recession, and now we think we're actually past that. So again, I think that's given a bit more confidence. I think interest rates have started to ease. So, it's not suddenly gone, but at the same time, I think it's actually becoming a lot more, it's leveling out a lot more and becoming a lot more of a better market. And, people need certainty in order to recruit, especially the markets that we're in. Certainty is pretty critical to having a good market, and it feels like, there is more certainty on a lot of fiscal decisions at the moment. So pretty good about it. Pretty cautious.
I like the frothy description of the market. I've not heard that one before. No, when you explained it takes a while to get down. I was like, oh yeah, that makes complete sense. I love that. Okay, so I will. Anyone asks me now, what's the US market? I'll say frothy. Okay, so we're wrapping up now, Mark. So what's next for Finatal? I know you guys have had huge success in market traction and some of the numbers that you've put on the board. How do you take that further? What's next?
Scale, recruit, good people. I think that's what's key, is in order to get us to where we are at the moment to where we're hoping to be in 2-3 years, we need to recruit really, really well. I think we also just need to... because the scale of the opportunities there, the market's there, and we need to just make sure that we are taking on the right people, we're training them well, they're landing well, they feel supported, we're encouraging more opportunities for also people coming over from the UK. But I think if we can recruit well and we don't again, like any business, the bigger it grows, the more you lose those sort of cultural values. And I think we need to make sure that we're not losing sight of what's got us to a really good position, and make sure that, again, the war stories that I've heard of people who've done it not particularly well or have had troubles with it are people who have recruited too quickly and get overexcited. So there's that bit of degree there. If you need to recruit well and you need to scale, but you need to scale at a pace that's actually sustainable. So I think it's holding back a bit of the opportunity and excitement, and making sure that taking on the right people at the right time and growing it in a sustainable way.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much. That's a wrap on today's episode. It's been brilliant. I know we're only really scratching the surface as well. 30 minutes is not very long, but huge congrats on your success, Mark. It's been brilliant to watch you from the sidelines, and I know it's going to continue to grow in the way it has already. If for anyone who's listening, if you're excited by what you've heard today, you maybe want to understand more about the market in general, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or there'll be a QR code at the end of this session that you can book a meeting in, or I'm pretty sure Mark will be happy to chat to anyone if you reach out to him on LinkedIn. For anyone who is interested in the APSCO trade delegation, there is another one taking place in September this year, where we will be taking recruitment leaders out to Austin, Texas and Miami, Florida. So if you are thinking of following a similar story to Mark, but maybe your market isn't in New York, then also please reach out. Be more than happy to talk about that event with you and the possibility of joining us. But for today, thank you again, Mark. We're looking forward to speak to you again soon, next time I'm in New York.
Awesome. Cheers, Amy. Thank you.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Want help backing out your US expansion? Visit us at www.pgcgroup.com to learn more, or schedule a free US expansion opportunity session with one of our consultants.